Hi everybody, and welcome to our annual Robot in 3 Days rankings video, where we're going to go through all the Robot in 3 Days teams that we were able to find and provide some rankings based on a completely subjective criteria that we put together for things. And this year we had 13 robot submissions. Actually, the one you're seeing right here, which is the Robots Done Quick. We actually didn't have in consideration because they just posted a video last night as of us airing this or filming this, so we weren't able to get to this team, but still wanted to show them off as well too. But as I mentioned, we have 13 teams that are going to be breaking down in this list that we were able to find videos for. Let's go through a little bit on how we rank these teams and how they went through. First off, I just want to say I'm Tyler, by the way, and I didn't do any of the rankings. I had associations with both the Redux and the Kettering teams this year. So we asked some of our other hosts to come in and provide rankings. They don't really have a stake in this game of where it is, so we feel like they're good people to go through and see what all these are. So let's actually first introduce everybody. Andre, starting with you.
Hi, I'm Andre. I'm from Team 955.
Hi, I'm Ari. I'm an alumni and volunteer in Southern New England.
Hi, I'm James. I'm a mentor of Team 179 from Riviera Beach, Florida.
I'm Tausif. I'm an alumni of 5431.
And probably for the first time in fun history, we have people from at least East Coast and West Coast and all over the country. So that's awesome to have all of you on, talk a bit more. So here's some of the judging process and how it works before we go into these teams. So as mentioned, you're going to see what their rank is. Let's talk about what each one of these means here. So we have 25 possible points for teams to get. First thing, practicality. Can teams take what has been here shown on Ri3D and can they build something better or learn from this? Ri3D, to many of us, is all about learning, presentation. What can you do for things to make it beneficial to the community, right? That's really what, when we view Ri3D, what we want to be about is how do we help the community and make it better. Performance 1 through 10. Is this something that could perform well in the field? We're always, that's some of the level that we want to see for things. Is it a robot that could actually be competitive? Would you consider this as a maybe a first or second pick robot in your alliance, that sort of thing? And then lastly, wow factor. How cool or inspiring is it? It's great to see multiple different teams out there showing off their ideas, but we want to once again be able to inspire others in the community as well too. So these are how we did our rankings. Now, is this the end all be all? No, it's definitely not. But this is our rankings that we do here. So we hope you enjoy as we go through. And one last thing is make sure you stick around because the difference between the first and second place is really close. There's a quarter point on there, so we can't wait to see that. So let's go ahead and hop into the rankings. This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. SolidWorks is free for first teams. Over 80% of U.S. engineering schools and 370,000 plus companies use SolidWorks to design great products. SolidWorks can help you design a great robot on desktop or on the cloud. Go to solidworks.com/first to register your team. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in scholarships. Scholarship applications for first students are now available. Get more information at kettering.edu/first. All right, let's start off with our number 13th ranked team. That's going to be from Big Sky Robotics, who had an overall score of 5.5, James.
All right, Big Sky Robotics is the Montana State University robot in 3 days. I actually rated this team a small bit higher than my fellow analysts because I actually think there's a lot to like here. Although ultimately the main scoring feature of this robot, its arm, does not work, they go quite in depth about what led to the arm's failure. The explanation of a major failed mechanism is almost as good for teams to learn from as a majorly successful mechanism is. I'm sure many teams were thinking of using belts to move their arms in a similar way, and this can save them some major heartache later on in the season. The passive cone riding gripper might be my favorite one from any of the Robot in 3 Days teams. The gripper itself really does seem elegant with its four-wheel kind of windmill-like design, and the ability to adjust its compression based on the game piece that it's intaking, whether it's a cone or a cube. Their ground intake is actually very similar to many other Robot in 3 Days teams, and I really do think that this year is the year of the Entraption Star in FRC. So many of these Robot in 3 Days have used them, and were not really a big thing in many past games. I always also like when a robot in 3 days takes the time to have bumpers and use the basic kit apart drivetrain. It's always a plus despite their more tippy version of the charging station, they were able to balance on it relatively quickly. With a little better documentation of their prototyping and design and the robot arm being fully functional, this team would have ranked probably much higher. That being said, as a first outing into Robot in 3 days from a college-based team, I am impressed and look forward to their next year's design.
All right, and that was Big Sky Robotics in the number 13 spot. Let's keep moving on. We're going to go find out who our number 12 rank team is. And coming in, that is going to be our friends up in Ontario with Ontario Tech with an overall score of 10.5, jumping up quite a bit here, Tassif.
Yeah, so Ontario Tech from Ontario Tech University, their robot, as you can clearly see, is able to easily drive up on the charging station, able to show that they're able to do the end game and give us those points. But with their mechanism, one thing I would recommend for their intake is to use dual pistons. As you can see, they're using one piston to grab the game pieces, which I actually like how they're able to grab all the game pieces and open and close their intake. But if they're able to use two pistons, in my opinion, it will be able to have redundancy in case one piston breaks during a match. I would also recommend just cleaning up those tubings. But overall, this robot is pretty nice. I would also recommend that probably having a motor to adjust the arm since they only have one joint. But overall, this robot does give some good ideas to teams on how to grab a game piece, especially for rookie teams, in my opinion. Could really use this as some good ideation on a grabber.
To jump in on what Tassif was saying, I agree about the using a motor for the arm tilt. With this robot, it's using so much pneumatics that if they lose pressure, their whole robot's dead in the water. And that's always a little scary in a game that's probably going to have some decent defense.
And that's Ontario Tech in the 12th spot, once again with an overall score of 10.5. Moving on, number 11's coming up here. That's going to be from our friends at Michigan State. First at Michigan State, Ari's going to be talking about them with an overall score of 10.75.
Yeah, so this Ri3D team is a team of college student alumni that aimed to build a simple robot that tested the age-old question, can we launch it? Their method used a substation loading pneumatic launcher that only launches cubes. This robot is pretty straightforward, and so is the documentation. The team was pretty process-focused, so we don't see as much technical depth as it does for development. For a team that chose to do such an outside-of-the-box concept, I would really like to see their strategic breakdown and maybe some other robot concepts to see where everything all weighed out. So, as for the robot, the cube loads into the robot from the substation into a cardboard launcher. It may be difficult to land this cube in the right place, but that can be improved over the course of a season or single event or any testing with field elements. Their cone manipulator, the Polecat, is simple and it works well enough for the hybrid nodes. This is literally a paint stir stick on a motor that sticks in and flips up to be carried across the field. Cannot get simpler than that. The idea to test a launch bot as a prototype is really useful information to the community, but unfortunately, First at Michigan State didn't really have field elements to test this with, so I still kind of feel unsure if this would be competitively viable. It is, however, a good solution to launching cubes that doesn't, in the words of Spectrum, sharp make cube sad. The strategy of this group aimed to do two simpler mechanisms at a higher level, but for this design to really work for me, I'd rather see these mechanisms closer to 10 out of 10 than a 3 out of 10. Getting that cube shot to be reliable and effective is a large part of that, and I just don't think that this robot is there yet. I think that more time refining both of these mechanisms would lead to this while still maintaining simplicity. This robot is a good alliance partner. It is simple, it has a low CG, it has a solid drivetrain for defense, and it can be useful in helpful ways. This robot would be good as maybe a third bot on a playoff alliance at our regional or district level.
Andre, I got to ask you, when you saw this robot, what did you think of the catapult flipper thing that they have?
I was very interested in its design because I think it's cool to shoot game pieces across the field. And yeah, I want to see a team go with a design like this.
Anybody else?
I want to see it work.
Yeah, right. So
yeah,
I mean,
they didn't have the field anywhere here, so I want to see them actually landing it on there and doing it.
It really does remind me of some of the really good shooting robots from 2018. That idea of taking a game that isn't meant to be shot, and shooting. There were some that were really effective. Like I think it was 610 was a very good shooting cube
Yeah.
robot that year.
Them in 4613.
Yeah, my team in 2018 also had a catapult button, and it worked in the for like once a match, but overall, I'm excited to see how this would do if it was actually implemented in this year.
All right, well, that is Michigan State in the 11th ring. Let's keep moving on. Number 10 is going to be Bison Robotics. Bison Robotics with a score of 11.5. And Andre, you're going to be taking the lead on this one. Tell us more about Bison Robotics.
Yep. Bison Robotics is based out of North Dakota State University. And their robot this year aimed to be able to pick up from the ground and the scoring station and be able to score on all nodes. Their design this year consists of an intake which has compliant wheels mounted in sort of a way where they don't spin, but instead they are able to upright cones, which I find very interesting because like my team and other teams I know are trying to upright cones. But I think the one of the flaws of this is that the compliant wheels don't appear to be on there very well. But other than that, they appear to score very well and have a pretty tight grip on the wheels. And I think this is a very good bot to look at for that purpose.
I think a new criteria for next year we should look at is jank factor potentially for something like this.
Yeah.
I think that would be a fun thing to add. This is just like when you're talking about like the end effector on the intake there. It's not just this team by any means. Many of the Ri3D teams we see this out of. It's sometimes funny to see, but definitely an interesting way that kind of just rotates a little bit on there too. Anybody else have thoughts on Bison?
Also, like in the video, how they show them taking scored cone from level 2, the middle node to the high node. It's something that probably isn't going to happen much, but in a close match, just taking one game piece and immediately giving it a value of +2 is really valuable, and they do it kind of easily. Like they don't struggle with it like they do getting it from the ground.
Also like how we just saw this a bit earlier in the video, how they're able to just pick up a cone with those two wheels at the edge of the cone,
Yeah.
and without it just slipping out, and that shows how good those compliant wheels are and how teams honestly should use them more.
I think one of the cool things I know that we saw in our testing is that there are just many wheels that do work for this game. I think that's kind of cool with how the game pieces are. Let's keep moving on. Coming up in number 9 is going to be FAMNM. So it's coming in from Michigan. On here, that's the First Alumni and Mentors Network at Michigan. Had an overall score of 12. And let's see, James, you're going to be talking to us a little bit more about this team and some of their rankings.
All right, yeah, the First Alumni and Mentors Network at Michigan. This is not their first round of making a robot in 3 days, but this robot reminds me a lot of robots from 2007 and 2011. It's a very basic, easy-to-design robot with a basic kit-of-parts style drivetrain, and they put a lot of personality into those bumpers to make them stand out. Their pinch-style claw is really unique with its open L-shaped and closed U-shaped design. I personally recommend something with a bit more touch-it-own-it style to it, but for teams with very limited funds and machining capabilities, this could be a very good intake for them. The robot also sports a solid 4-bar mechanism that appears long enough to score on those top nodes. The robot did have some solid overview videos going over the individual mechanisms, however it does appear a little on the sluggish side, and I'm personally not a fan of anything that exits outside the frame perimeter once deployed and never comes back in. That's just dangerous in a game like this. Overall, I'd say this was a solid outing from FAMNM, and I look forward to what they show next season.
And that was once again in the 9th spot. We're going to keep moving on to our number 8 spot, and that's going to be not going too far away, sticking in Michigan. That's going to be the Kettering Bulldogs, a team that Fun has produced a couple of videos for. And Tassif, tell us more about what you saw on this team.
Yeah, so we've done Kettering before, and this year, nothing different. They always are coming out with some interesting robots. One thing I do like in this video, the robot's arm is not powered, but this intake is really just grab it and own it. It's a ground floor intake, and the intake is at a perfect level to pick up the cone and not let it slip out because the intake doesn't adjust in or out. So it's at a perfect level to just pick up that cone at the perfect height and just own it and just be able to drop it and place it on the nodes. Same thing with the cube, since the cube just is its own shape, it has no issues with that. And if when this arm is powered, I'm pretty sure it would do really well in a match. Probably will be a second or third pick in an alliance. But one thing I do like also is that their intake just it stays at this like it's always parallel to the ground, and that just helps placing down all these game pieces on the nodes. I really do like that.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me with Kettering, I think their design looks really good. We haven't fully seen it perform, so I'm not. Once again, I didn't vote in this, but from a performance-wise in there, I'd like to see it perform more in the field in order to maybe get a higher rating or even the rating it's at personally for something like this, because we haven't seen more content out of Kettering Bulldogs. So hopefully something like that will come out soon, because I think having this robot with some fine-tuning could be a really good performing bot.
Yeah, I think that also goes with all Ri3D robots. With some extra fine tuning and on a competition field, we can see how their full potential is. I really am excited to see this robot do well.
Yeah, to jump on what Tyler said, I rated this robot much lower than everyone else did for those exact reasons. Since we haven't seen it move under its own power and actually score anything, I am worried about people just looking at the geometry and being like, yeah, that'll work 100% of the time, as opposed to somebody like Big Sky, who did have a failed mechanism. You can at least learn from a failure. This is an unknown, and that's worrisome to me.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
And that's why multiple people give their opinions and votes on there. It's great to hear how everybody's approaching that as well. Let's go up to Canada here, and we'll talk about Sherbrooke coming in. I think I've seen this team before. Ari, have you?
Yeah, they've I think this is their third or fourth year in Ri3D or RIE 100H. So in seventh we have our only international team on this list. They're out of Quebec City, Sherbrooke Ri3D. Sherbrooke had a lot of good design decisions that teams that are looking at doing a handoff system can learn from. They collect both cubes and cones from the floor, and they score on all levels. The robot, however, is complex and slow. They do, however, have really good intake geometry that's well thought out. Specifically, the bar on the top of their intake, it flips the cone over so that they hand it off with the same orientation each time, whether it's tipped or righted. The intake sits outside of the bumper, which also allows it to be wide enough for some driver air. We're not seeing that as much with these Ri3D teams, but this one, definitely seeing that. That being said, it is at a greater risk of getting hit, which not sure it would survive being made of laser cut wood. Unfortunately, this team not very quick or flashy, and their documentation is all in French Canadian, which makes it difficult to capture attention and understand the specifics behind their design. My worries with this design are on the wear on the linear slide that places the game pieces from the elevator. If that gets disconnected or hit, what kind of failure mode would you be looking at on the field? And could that area be strengthened? This is a really high-level design, and it was executed quickly, but with more refining, this could work well. It just currently demonstrates that handoffs are difficult and that you're going to need pneumatics this season. This design involves getting a lot of details right, without a lot of immediate payoff. But with some improvements, I can see this robot being beneficial to an alliance as a low-second robot to a team that can't score on the third level.
You brought up something that's interesting on here when you brought up laser cut wood, because like last year we saw some teams that were able to effectively use a wood robot, but this year a little bit more open field, that sort of thing. Anybody else have thoughts in regards to like could something like that actually hold up to what the rigors of this game is going to be?
I think internally, like an internal mechanism, like an arm or a handoff, it could, but something that's going to be that big outside of the robot, probably not. And I'm somebody who loves laser cut wood. I think it's a really cool aesthetic, and it's really good for quick prototypes. But something that's going to live that big outside the frame, even if you're only going to deploy it in safe zones. We all know that sometimes your own alliance partners can cause you almost as much damage as the opposing alliance. So just a little worrisome.
Yeah, I'm worried about some aluminum and metal mechanisms being outside of the frame perimeter. I think hits are going to be tough in that middle section.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that for intakes or anything outside, you should try to use some sort of flexible material.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. Just a quick correction note. We did have Ontario Tech earlier as well, too. So this is our second international team that we have. But I will say French-Canadian definitely it feels more out there, I think, than our friends in Ontario as well, too. So
Forget that Ontario's international.
Exactly, right?
Just over the border.
Let's keep going on to our number 6 ranked team here for our 2023 Robot in 3 Days rankings. And that's the University of Minnesota Robotics team.
All right, yeah, this robot has a very unique way of using linear motion. I haven't seen really any other team this year experiment with this. And a few things I would change about it is I would make it a bit longer, as in the video it shows that it can't really reach the high node. It can only reach the medium and low node, but I feel like with a bit of modification, you can reach that high node. And then I'd also the intake. While I think it's very good for holding on to the game pieces, I feel like a wider intake would work better for more of a touch it, own it philosophy while playing this game. And then also something I saw is that they were picking up fallen cones, but it takes longer for them to score fallen cones, which is something to consider. And yeah, I think they do have a pretty strong design. But I think like all of these teams, like we've said, it needs a bit of work.
I do like how they just showed integration with April tags, as that is the new thing for this season.
Yeah, one of the things with UMN has gone under the moniker Snow Problem in the past too, so they might seem familiar to you. They build really good robots. I'm going to be honest with you. This looks exactly like an oversized FTC robot this year. If you were to look at some of the FTC designs with Power Play and what they've created to handle cones, this literally looks like that pass-through type intake, very similar to what we see in FTC games, James.
Yeah, I was going to say, I rated this robot in terms of practicality a lot higher than everyone else did, and it's strictly because of that FTC copying type look. That elevator is a COTS part in FTC that they're very much used to, so anybody who has an FTC team or FTC experience, they can make this elevator quick and keep it really well working.
I will say, though, that we just saw they have a piston adjusting that elevator. That drop was pretty hard, so I'm just a bit worried that like if that drop ever to happen, it could damage the elevator, but we will see how it plays out.
I think that drop is only to use at the start of the match, since they have to start in the frame perimeter, and that's just to show how they get the tilt, but they are inside the frame perimeter at the start, so I think that's like a one-time action.
Yeah, that makes sense then.
Let's move on to number 5 as we start to wind down our listen here. That's going to be coming in, Pride of the North. We've seen this team before. I really do like this robot, just looking at up front. Talk to us more about why they end up in number 5, James.
All right, Pride of the North is the Robot in 3 Days team based out of the University of North Dakota. This robot uses a poor man's pink arm, which is a climber in a box with a claw on the end of it. The claw itself is pretty slow at getting the game pieces, and there are much better pinch claws from the Robot in 3 Days teams, but it's still a solid mechanism with its ability to upright cones. The arm being able to pick up and score from both sides of the robot is very impressive. However, several tests have come out from Open Alliance teams showing how these poor man's versions can bind when the weight of the arm is not at 90-degree intervals. However, the most impressive thing on this robot, to me, is its swerve drive. This might be the fastest robot in 3 days this year, and it is also the one that has shown its ability to get on the charge station. Their walkthrough video was solid, however, in my opinion, keeping it out of the top 4 was its lack of bumpers when showing the ability to get on the charge station, the questionable sturdiness of the arm, and the slight lacking of documentation to explain the changes they made to the climber in a box. Overall, this is still a pretty amazing robot that I would not complain if I got paired with in a quals match.
One of the issues I saw with this and with all pink arm designs is that if there's a lot of ability to get hit with it, and I think if another robot is playing defense and hits your pink arm, then it's pretty much out for the rest of the match, depending on how hard it's being hit.
The rest of the match, maybe the next match too. If you get any binding in there, it's going to be tough to repair. That being said, though, the fact that it's so low to the ground means that your center of gravity is very low, and you're not going to be as tippy as some of the other elevators that are out there.
To speak to the sturdiness of the poor man's pink arm, which is the climber in a box that's edited that they used, that one I'm worried about. I can speak from personal experience. An actual pink arm, like properly machined, that thing can win against some robots, but not this.
All right, coming in at our number 4 spot is going to be the Zoukeepers. This team had a great Ri3D last year as well, too, doing some of the traversal climb. I remember them from that as well, or at least I think I do. So in the number 4 spot with a great score, 16.25 overall. Steve, tell us more about this team. We'll get everybody's input on our top 4 teams.
Yeah, so this robot, it just reminds me of 2018 Spectrum. It has a very similar look to it. One thing I also like is that they have an ability to just pick up cones that are laying over, and that just gives it an extra advantage of any fallen cones, because that's like one of the big things teams are wondering, how to pick up fallen cones, and that also mechanism also gives it an extra ability to just hold on to that cone, make sure it doesn't slip out as well. And I really like how they're able to hit all the nodes and just go basically at any angle. And it's very similar to the robot that we Pride of the North, but this one, in my opinion, is just a little bit more fined out and is able to just, again, pick up cones when it's fallen over, put all the cubes and cones. To me, it works really well.
Yeah, I feel like this is a very simple design that works. I feel like we might see a lot of I guess a lot of lower ranked teams end up using something like this, as it's pretty easy to build, and as seen here, it's pretty competitive.
One of the things that I really like about this robot is that it uses its bumpers to align with where it's putting the cone on, because it knows it's going to be going for the low one each time. Like, it'll use its bumpers to run into those two things right there. I think having a hard stop on the field is going to be really important this year, especially when you're trying to align on something that's so tiny. Something that I'm concerned about this robot, though, is the linear slide itself. I know that Zoukeepers pointed out that they were having some bending issues with that robot arm coming down too far. So if you're a team that's looking into this, make sure that your linear slide is really tight there.
Yeah, this robot reminds me so much of Switch and cargo ship specialists from 2018 and 2019. I also really liked that after this was released, it was pointed out that it kind of breaks some of the frame perimeter and sizing rules. And when they released the CAD for this robot, they did fix all of their CAD so everything stays within spec and legality. But I also agree that linear slide, like we talked about potentially adding a jankiness ranking, this is probably the jankiest mechanism in the top 4.
All right, coming into our top 3 spot is going to be one of 2 teams from Redux, and that's going to be the first one, which is Mr. Peanut. This is the one that has the linear slide arm on here. This is actually using a ThriftyBot arm, if I remember correctly, and they had a overall rating of 17.25. Ari, tell us more about them.
So just first off, the amount of video and documentation that you guys put together for Redux this year is phenomenal, absolutely admirable, and every team should kind of shoot for that as the gold standard. Every lesson that was learned on this team has info behind it, which gives both of their robots a boost in the practicality portion of the rankings. So this robot made a lot of smart trade-offs to capitalize on what it could do. The elevator appears smooth and well-engineered for the arm and carriage, although it can only score cones up to level 2. The grabber can control both cubes and cones, especially those from the station, although it can only pick up cones from the upright position. The design is a bit more complex for only going up to level 2 with cones, but for any team that has experience with elevators, this should be well within range. The intake sort of needs some sort of backstop, kind of like Zoukeepers, like we just saw. But further adjustments needed for the touch it, own it kind of deal that we've been talking about. Good direction overall. One that I think we'll see a lot of this year at early week events. Outer wheels for cubes, inner wheels for the cones. Once you've calibrated the speed and tension that you need for this kind of intake, it's really an effective dual purpose intake. The intake can be iterated on across the season as well. If later they find a way to pick up floor cones, it could be swapped in on the arm position. The arm itself is not as sturdy as I would like it to be, especially because it's always outside of your frame perimeter when you're traversing the field. The robot needs a bit more programming work. In addition to that, specifically the set points where you want to score, where you want to pick up from the field. So overall, lots of little things to work on, but really good robot that would be a great pick of a regional district higher seed alliance.
So I was pretty brutal to Mr. Peanut in my ranking compared to everyone else. I scored it much lower on both practicality and performance. I hit all the robots who did swerve with a small practicality negative just because teams who don't already have swerve in their possession and practice with it probably shouldn't be going with it. But the only other issue that I have with it is if you watch it when it goes over these bumps, it seems to be dropping the cones quite a lot. And when you compare that to the other robots in 3 days, and it is a much more controlled video, they seem to have a better grip. And now I know later on in this video, it's revealed that this robot's battery is basically dead, and that probably didn't help matters. But it's just between that and the discussion that's going on about how we need to set like the certain set limits of like this is where the arm needs to go and stuff like that with programming really does hit it on practicality for me, because your basic rookie team with no experience would not be able to do that type of programming easily.
I agree that rookie teams would not be able to do that advanced programming, but when you have teams that do have some extra more experience, setting those limits and being able to adjust that extra fine-tuning needed would help this robot do well, and being able to, of course, have a much better battery on would also show that the performance would also be much better. But overall, I agree with what James just said.
Yeah, another thing I want to point out is that it doesn't grip the game pieces very well, as I guess we just saw it drops the game pieces a couple of times. But other than that, this is a pretty good robot, and going back to documentation, most of the Redux videos were posted in my team's Discord, and that just shows that a lot of teams are seeing these designs, and they're helping a lot of teams.
The one thing I'll just say in regards to the claw itself that I know the team learned, and I didn't work on the robot at all, so I don't have as much insight as probably others do, is I know that they had a tensioner on it. I think that it was just like surgical tubing or something like that, and they had to really adjust that a lot and then like readjust it over time. So that definitely was an issue with that intake, especially from getting cubes in. You notice when they tried to grab it a couple times, just had troubles getting in unless it was against like a backstop or something like that.
Yeah, I think Ben actually goes over and adjusts it later in the video.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, he does. It's a piece of black surgical tubing, and he just grabs it and like pulls it around one more time.
And missing out by just 0.25 points. It's so close between our top two teams, but it's going to be the other Redux robot, the Kool-Aid Man robot here. Guys, what do you have to say about the Kool-Aid Man robot as we went through? I think, Andre, you're going to be talking about this team first.
Yep, I believe that this team is, with a bit of adjusting on the intake, can be very competitive. I think that having the full-length intake allows for the touch it, own it type philosophy, and then and since it's able to intake from any orientation, this can help with other teams who may have dropped cones, or if your alliance dropped cones, something like that. And then with their auto writing claw in order to score, I think that's going to be a design that a lot of other teams are going to use for the same purpose of picking up cones that have fallen over. And then I think that it also does a very good job of scoring, as ZNA can score pretty well. And then it's one of the only teams that have done swerve, while previously said it Swerve may be a disadvantage for lower ranked teams. I think that being able to show that Swerve can get on top of the charge station is very important for other teams doing Swerve.
Yeah, so overall, I really like this robot because it's our third handoff robot on the list, but I think that it's one of our more successful handoff robots. I don't want to call it simple, but simple for a handoff robot. I think the handoff here is worth it because you do have that touch it, own it collector to a lighter, very specifically oriented writing gripper. I think that justifies it in my mind. However, it's still very complex and so many things could go wrong. And perfecting that handoff between the two, where it sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, is going to be a big task within itself.
It looks way better in the produce video.
Yes, it does. I'm noticing that. Also, making sure that nothing falls out while you're driving at high speeds is also going to be one of my issues with this robot. You want to be able to do fast and chaotic cycles, and handoff style robots make that kind of difficult.
Yeah, one thing that I'll bring up is since it looks like in the longer form video, it's the same person driving both robots. And I brought up with Mr. Peanut how like it's so finicky with programming and you need the preset points. Compare that to Kool-Aid Man where it's able to score so much quicker with the driver just eyeing it. I also, like everybody else brought up, I like the touch it own it aspect. I like the self-riding cone aspect. I did, once again, I docked points for the swerve drive, but I do actually think that this one utilizes its swerve a little bit better just because it has that intake so it can come at it from the angle that it prefers as opposed to the Mr. Peanut that does just have its single gripper intake.
Yeah, basically what James just said, having swerve and that out intake, just allowing it to pick up any game piece at basically close angles is really handy for teams. One thing that was mentioned in the video is having that out intake in when you have the arm on the other side because that does break some frame perimeter rules. But other than that, I really love that passive intake, especially with the cones to easily just let the cone just line up with the heavy side at the bottom and easily place them on the nodes. That just is something that I absolutely love and something I'm pretty sure a lot of teams are going to take in because having that intake, because again, people are always wondering how do you pick up cones that are like falling onto the ground. With this passive intake, you just pick up the cone and then the heavy side is automatically at the bottom and allows you to easily just place it on the nodes. I just love that intake.
Yeah,
Well,
you just saw in the video, Mr. Peanut hands off to Kool-Aid Man. You don't have the better robot feeding, you have the better robot scoring.
we did film it both ways, by the way. For the other one was with the cone, and the cone one just didn't turn out for us originally. This one we actually did, I think, in one take on it, which was very surprising. Let's move on to our number one team taking it this year. Congratulations on the first updates now. First updates now, robot in 3 days. We're going to give it to Cranberry Alarm. What a phenomenal robot, James, they created this year.
Yeah, Cranberry Alarm is a new robot in 3 days team based out of Greenwood, Indiana. I love everything about this robot and this team. They showed a lot of prototypes that didn't make it on the final robot, which is always a plus. The very narrow kit-apart chassis will be great when trying to balance on the charge station. The tilting part of their elevator is controlled very well, and while slightly slow, can be adjusted while on the move, while the extension part of the elevator is fast, which is good for getting in and out of that congested power station quickly. I have said earlier about pinching intakes lacking the touch-it-own-it factor, and that still rings true with this robot. However, the much wider area of its open position and how solid it does hold onto it once in possession is very nice. This may also be one of, if not the best documented robot in 3 days this year, with so many videos posted and all of their CAD and code available quickly. I am thoroughly impressed by this small crew. This robot also reminds me a lot of the original robot in 3 days from 2019, in that it is a robot that is competition ready now. It may not be Einstein Captain caliber, but this robot is going to give the Everybot a run for its money in terms of a competitive but simple and affordable design. I am so looking forward to this team continuing to do robot in 3 days in the next couple years.
Honestly, with this robot, I love how they have presets for each level of the nodes. That is honestly really, really handy. And I love how their robot is basically open in the inside, because one of the main issues that could happen with teams is if a game piece gets stuck in your robot, you can't really pick up another game piece. So since it's really open inside, they can just move around and the game piece will probably fall out. So I just love how open this robot is, love how they already have presets within 3 days of kickoff, and just being able to really demonstrate how they're able to easily score at any level is amazing.
I personally rated this one a bit lower than everyone else, mainly for the fact that it isn't touch own it. But beyond that, this is a very good robot that is able to score well and is very simple for other teams to replicate or iterate upon. And yeah.
So one of my kind of concerns that I saw with this robot originally was I was really concerned about the center of gravity and how it would play out if their arm was all the way out and they were kind of traversing the field. But then they did actual cycles in their video, and I feel like that's really, really important. We didn't see any other teams doing full field cycles with their robot once they got it together, and they were fine. They weren't tippy at all. But that important aspect was very pivotal in deciding kind of what I rated this team, and especially for how high I rated them.
Something I want to add in too is being a new R3D team this team has not got enough love in regards to viewership of things. Everybody should be going and watching these videos that they created. Just search Cranberry Alarm or go check it on Cheat Delphi as well. But compared to maybe Pride of the North or the UMM team and stuff like that, who their reveal videos were in the 5 digits for things, a lot of people need to see this robot and not enough have. So I really encourage you to show your teams this robot and how cool it is, and some of the processes they've gone through have been really well done. So congratulations to them.
I'm really looking forward to, at the time of recording the Everybot hasn't been released yet. And looking at this, like I said in my kind of breakdown, I'm really interested into what will be that simple competitive go-to this year. If people see this, I think it could probably beat the Everybot.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for our Robot in 3 Days teams. All 13 teams, congratulations on a great Robot in 3 days. And teams, go out there and make sure that you are looking at where you want inspiration from, but make sure you're building your own robots as well, too, with this. As we talked about, some of these robots, it could be more competitive than others, but in general, if you're looking to build that robot that's going to get you into a high rank seed and stuff like that, use this for inspiration. Find out what didn't work and improve upon it. Find out what you liked and look at how you can incorporate it as well too. But congratulations to all of our teams and judges. Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us more about these fantastic teams. Of course, we'll have much more content coming with all different things in the Charged Up season. But till then, thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you next time. This video on First Updates Now is made possible by viewers like you and also the following sponsors. At Kettering University, over 30% of the student population was in high school robotics. These same students have received a portion of over $7 million in scholarships. Scholarship applications for FIRST students are now available. Get more information at kettering.edu/first. SOLIDWORKS is free for FIRST teams. Over 80% of U.S. engineering schools and 370,000 plus companies use SOLIDWORKS to design great products. SOLIDWORKS can help you design a great robot on desktop or on the cloud. Go to solidworks.com/first to register your team. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on our new videos. Keep the conversation going and provide your input to our content. Watch our live shows at twitch.tv/firstupdatesnow. Join our Discord at discord.gg/firstupdatesnow and check out Fun FTC on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and First Updates Now on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter.